That night, as the fire burned lower, Noah didn't sleep. He sat by the embers, laptop open. Documents spread across a folding table like pieces of a battlefield map. His grandfather, Harold Trenton, had been meticulous in land ownership, leaving behind decades of maps and boundary agreements. What Noah found among them was more than confirmation, it was leverage. Edgewater. Pine's property lines ended a full 0.7 miles east of the lake. The greenbelt the HOA bragged about in their glossy welcome brochures. It belonged to the Trentons, privately held and passed through generations. The lake, the trails, even the gravel service road, Noah's name sat clearly on the deed, with a permanent easement stretching across the only access point the HOA had ever used. Not only was the land private, but technically, the HOA had been trespassing for years. The next day, Noah took a drive through the neighborhood. It was a quiet Sunday, and Edgewater Pines looked as picturesque as advertised. Lawns trimmed too. Regulation height, flower beds manicured to match house paint. An old man picked up leaves in front of his mailbox with surgical precision. HOA signs stood tall like sentinels. A community of order. Pride in every parcel. Shared spaces, shared standards. At the far end of the cul-de-sac, New Addition had appeared. A wooden sign freshly hammered into the ground. HOA access trail, Lake Serenity, residents only. Noah got out of his truck and stared at the sign, the nerve of it. It was posted at the trailhead that cut directly through his property. The message wasn't a mistake. It was a declaration. He took a picture. Then another. A few more down the trail where children's bikes were parked and a couple strolled hand in hand toward the lake. It looked innocent, wholesome even. But it was his land, and no one had asked. At that moment, something shifted. This wasn't just HOA arrogance. It was encroachment, fraudulent use, quiet theft hidden under mulch and HOA newsletters. The signs weren't just wrong, they were evidence. By Monday, he'd spoken to 2 attorneys. The first brushed him off, said it wasn't worth the fight. The second listened carefully and then said 10 words Noah wouldn't forget. If you've got documents and footage, we have a case. And so, Noah got to work. The trail cameras fed directly to a secure drive. Every passerby, every dog walker, every resident dragging a kayak down the illegal dock recorded. Noah placed small green flags along the actual property boundary. Invisible to the average hiker, but clear in drone footage he recorded from above. The HOA had not only wandered onto his land, they had built on it, maintained it, managed it, as if it were their own. They'd called the cops on him, but they had no idea the lake they tried to patrol was about to become the very ground they'd lose by the end of the week. He had a thick folder of documentation, video footage, timestamps, and notarized copies of every deed and plat, map going back 40 years. And then he sent a letter, certified, return receipt requested, to the Edgewater Pines Homeowners Association Board. You are hereby put on notice for continued unauthorized entry, trespass, and use of private property located at Lake Trenton... The notice was simple, clear, deadly, and it would be the first domino to fall. The letter didn't take long to land. By midweek, Gloria Sutton stood in front of the HOA clubhouse, reading the notice like it was an insult scribbled in crayon. She scoffed aloud, then passed it to the board's treasurer. A nervous man who looked at the papers like they might burst into flame. A joke, Gloria said, waving a manicured hand. He thinks he's clever. It's probably printed this nonsense off Google, but the envelope had been sealed by a law firm. The notarized documents attached weren't from the internet. They were legitimate boundary surveys, water rights, and historical plat records going back generations, all pointing to one damning conclusion. Lake Serenity didn't belong to Edgewater Pines. It belonged to Noah Trenton, and that made every trail, bench, fishing sign, and dock built in the past 10 years a legal liability. Gloria knew it, but she also knew something else. Her power came from perception. The residents believed the lake was theirs. If she allowed that illusion to break, everything unraveled, so she played offense. 2 days after Noah sent the letter, a new batch of signs appeared along the trail leading to the lake. This time they were printed in bold red HOA property. Trespassing will be reported, not just that Noah received a typed notice on HOA letterhead. Cease all unauthorized activity at the lake, including overnight stays, fire pits, and WILO. Vehicle access. Further violations will incur daily fines. He almost laughed when he read it. They were doubling down. But that was exactly what he wanted. The more they pushed, the deeper they went. Every new action was logged. Every sign added to the folder. Even the fines, they were unlawful, sent to someone who wasn't a resident. For being on his own land, Noah's attorney encouraged patience. They're arrogant, she said. They think they're untouchable. Let them bury themselves. So, he waited and watched. Residents came and went across the trail like usual. Children ran down the dock with tackle boxes and towels. Couples picnicked under shade trees. Kayaks skimmed the lake's surface. All of it now caught on trail cameras, time-stamped and mapped. They weren't neighbors enjoying a community lake. They were trespassers, unknowingly building the case against the very people who gave them access. And then it happened. A young couple parked their SUV directly on Noah's easement road, dragging a canoe down the slope. The man hammered a makeshift reserve by HOA sign into the dirt, staking, claimed to a spot barely 10 feet from Noah's tent. That night, Noah sat by the fire again, but this time, he wasn't alone. He was joined by 2 men from a private survey team, hired to map every inch of the property with precision. Laser-guided stakes were driven into the ground. High-resolution GPS coordinates recorded every structure and path. The data would soon be part of an affidavit by the end of the week. Noah delivered another letter, this one thicker bound, and marked notice of trespass and intent to file claim. The silence that followed lasted only 2 days. On the 3rd day, Gloria responded with a dramatic flourish. A public letter posted on the HOA bulletin board, sent to every mailbox in Edgewater Pines, declared that a known squatter was illegally camping on sensitive HOA environmental land. And the HOA would take all necessary steps to protect community resources. It was bold, it was reckless, and it was exactly what Noah had hoped for, because tucked inside the folder already on his attorney's desk was the recorded footage of Gloria herself walking across his property, clipboard in hand, directing a contractor to install the lake sign. And behind that clipboard, stamped with the HOA seal, was a small line of text no one had noticed before. Install. At Shoreline HOA approved recreation zone. The lie had a paper trail, and it was about to drag the entire HOA board into court. Noah's attorney filed the initial civil complaint on a quiet Thursday morning. By lunch, the Edgewater Pines HOA board was in full panic mode. 5 counts of trespass, 2 for illegal construction on private land, 1 for misrepresentation of property lines in official communications, and 1 particularly damning claim: fraudulent use of public funds for improvements on land the HOA didn't own. Gloria Sutton sat stone-faced at the head of the long oak conference table inside the HOA clubhouse. Across from her, the other board. Members fidgeted with their pens and avoided eye contact. "This is a coordinated attack," she said coldly. "He's trying to intimidate us. We've done nothing wrong." But her treasurer, Ron Blevins, wasn't so sure anymore. "I looked over the county records," said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The lake. He's right. It's his. It's always been his." Gloria snapped. "Then why didn't anyone say anything 10 years ago?" The room fell into silence. For a decade, they had promoted Lake Serenity in flyers, collected dues to maintain the trails, hosted HOA-sanctioned community paddle days. The lake had become part of the neighborhood identity. and now it was a legal disaster. The damage control was immediate. The HOA removed the most recent signs and suspended further maintenance. Gloria posted an emergency update claiming land. Disputes are being clarified, and residents are encouraged to enjoy alternative green spaces in the meantime. But the rumors spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered about lawsuits, about fines, about fraud. Noah, meanwhile, remained quiet but strategic. He issued a formal cease and desist to the HOA, citing active trespassing violations. He had already delivered copies of his claim to the county recorder and tax office, ensuring the land's ownership was no longer up for debate. And then he filed something else, something subtle, something dangerous, a formal complaint to the district environmental authority, on the grounds that the HOA had been maintaining landscaping and using herbicides within 20 feet of a natural water source without a permit. By the time Gloria heard about the complaint, she was standing on the dock in heels. Phone pressed to her ear, arguing with a local reporter who had gotten wind of the lawsuit. She barely noticed the environmental authority truck that pulled up behind her until the officer walked down the dock with a clipboard. "Are you the one responsible for this structure?" he asked. She stammered. This is HOA managed land, yes." The officer raised an eyebrow. "It's not. This land's privately owned. That's what the complaint says. I've got to inspect every improvement and confirm permit compliance. Failure to comply carries a per-day fine." Gloria's face paled. This is harassment. But the officer was already snapping photos. Noah watched from a distance, arms folded, camera rolling. Every move Gloria made now was either a violation or evidence. But the real storm was still gathering, because just 1 week later, the first certified letter arrived, not for Gloria but for each of the HOA board members. Individually. Notice of personal liability in ongoing trespass action. Ron Blevins quit the board that same evening. The secretary followed. Gloria, stunned but defiant, remained. But her power was waning in. The cracks had turned to fractures. That night, Noah sat by his tent again, the lake rippling under a silver moon, and smiled to himself. The board had spent years pretending the lake belonged to them. Now they were starting to realize something far worse. He didn't just own the lake, he owned the consequences. For 2 days, Gloria didn't leave her house. The once proud queen of Edgewater Pines had vanished behind drawn curtains and unanswered calls. Outside, the HOA bulletin board was stripped clean. The laminated flyers for lake yoga and sunset cleanup day removed without a word. Residents avoided eye contact as they walked by the once rivered trailhead. That now looked more like a crime scene than a community treasure. Inside her kitchen, Gloria clutched a cold mug of coffee and stared at the growing stack of legal papers. There were too many letters to count. Some addressed to the board, others personally to her. The worst was the latest one. Notice of discovery requests, trespass documentation, and internal communications. They wanted her emails, her texts, the board's meeting notes. They wanted everything, and Gloria knew there were things in those records she couldn't afford to see the light of day, because the lake wasn't the only lie. When the HOA had first adopted the trail system years ago, the move was entirely informal. Gloria had insisted it would boost property values, and no one questioned her. No formal approval, no permits, no property line reviews. It's just a clipboard, a landscaping crew, and a few charismatic speeches about enhancing community living. And now, those shortcuts were eating her alive. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that someone had flipped. Noah's phone buzzed just after midnight. A private message. No name, just a number. Attached was a photograph, a screenshot of an HOA email chain dated 2 years earlier. The subject line read, "Lake Maintenance Budget Allocation, Vote," and the first message was from Gloria herself. "Don't worry about the ownership lines, no one's enforcing them. Just push it through and get the signs up before inspection week." Noah read it twice, then leaned back in his chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. That single email cracked everything open, but he didn't stop there. Over the next 24 hours, more screenshots came in, photos of meeting minutes, budget spreadsheets, a copy of the original Lake Serenity welcome brochure with the property falsely labeled as HOA certified natural space. It was clear someone on the inside was feeding him ammunition. He didn't ask who. He didn't have to. The next morning, Ron Blevins, now an ex-treasurer, called for a private meeting. They met at a coffee shop 2 towns over. Ron arrived with bags under his eyes and a folder clutched tightly in one hand. He ordered black coffee, didn't sit until Noah did, and then spoke quickly, as if releasing pressure from a boiling kettle. She knew, Ron said, about the land, the boundaries. She always knew. Noah waited. I didn't at first. None of us did. We trusted her. She always had maps printed. Showed us buffer zones and green easements. Said the lake was in dispute, but under temporary stewardship. It sounded official. We bought it. We spent money on it. And the funds? Noah asked. Ron nodded. Community dues, thousands. Over the years, we funneled it into those trails, the dock, the picnic stations. That money's not just gonits, misused. Illegally. Noah opened the folder Ron handed him. Inside were copies of internal financial ledgers. Every dollar linked to a fake project. Waterside Wellness Station. Erosion control improvements. Even HOA Lake Security Patrol. A term Noah now found hilarious. This, Ron said quietly, is why I walked away. I'm not going down for her, and others won't either. And just like that, the silence was broken. Noah now had an informant, documents, and direct proof of willful misconduct. The HOAS, wall of control built on appearances and bureaucracy, was crumbling. But Gloria wasn't done yet, because even as the board splintered, she had one last card to play, something buried deep in the HOA bylaws, a clause no one had read in years, something she planned to use to turn the tables before the eviction notices came. By the time Ron's documents were in Noah's hands, Gloria Sutton was already drafting her counterstrike. She locked herself in the HOA clubhouse and pulled out the original bylaws from a fireproof cabinet that hadn't been opened in years. She flipped through the pages with trembling fingers until she found its section 1 for C. Buried between landscaping codes and emergency powers, temporary protective occupancy. In the event of threats to community land or public use areas, Board reserves the right to designate emergency protective actions, including temporary occupation or blockage of disputed spaces until the matter is resolved in court or by mediation. It was vague, sloppy. Written in 2001 when the HOA had far fewer members and no real legal oversight. But it was there. It gave her just enough to try one last desperate move. That evening, 3 board loyalists met at her house, those who hadn't yet jumped ship. She handed each of them a printed flyer and gave exact instructions. Block the trail, erect a fence, install cameras, claim protective action. This is our land until a judge says otherwise, Gloria insisted. The residents need to see strength. We're the board. We make the rules. Within 24 hours, a crude fence was erected across the main trail entrance. A banner fluttered in the wind. Community Safety Action, access temporarily restricted by board vote. It was a bluff. Final. Desperate illusion of control. But Noah didn't react the way Gloria expected. He didn't come storming down the trail. He didn't call the police. He didn't even post online. Instead, he smiled quietly as his drone hovered overhead, recording every nail, every camera. Every pile of donated HOA funds now being sunk into unauthorized construction. Then, he made a single phone call to the county sheriff. And the next morning, the blue and white cruiser rolled into Edgewater Pines like the sound of inevitability. Sheriff Davis stepped out. Boots crunching on gravel, Stetson tilted low. He wasn't just a lawman. He was an old friend of Noah's father. And more importantly, he had the deeds, the footage. and a judge's preliminary ruling already in his cruiser. He walked past the fence, ducked under the banner, and knocked firmly on Gloria's door. She opened it like she'd been expecting an Amazon package. Her smile didn't last long. "I'm here to inform you." Sheriff Davis said calmly that the HOA is in violation of multiple trespass warnings, illegal construction, and a newly granted temporary restraining order filed by the legal owner of Lake Trenton, Mr. Noah Trenton. Gloria blinked. "That restraining order is temporary." He raised a hand. "So is your fence. You've got until sundown to take it down, remove your equipment, and vacate all physical structures on Trenton's property." "You're siding with a squatter." "No, ma'am," Davis replied. "I'm siding with a landowner. This isn't cleared by tonight. My department will remove it for you, with fines." She slammed the door before he finished. Word spread through the neighborhood within hours. Residents stood at the edge of the trail, watching silently as HOA volunteers scrambled to disassemble the fence. The same neighbors who once praised Gloria's monthly newsletters now took videos on their phones, recording every hammer pull and bitter glare. And then came the twist. That evening, just after sunset, an unmarked black SUV pulled into Noah's gravel driveway. Out stepped a woman in a gray suit with a badge on her belt, an investigator from the county auditor's office. She held up a file thicker than anything Gloria had seen. "Mr. Trenton," she said, "we've received credible reports of HOA funds being used off-record without resident approval on private property. Proven true, it constitutes financial misappropriation and civil fraud." Noah looked past her toward the lake, where the last of the unauthorized fence posts had just been hauled away. "Then I think," he said calmly, "you're going to want to talk to everyone who ever signed a budget sheet with Gloria Sutton's name on it. Because now the battle wasn't just legal, it was criminal." The clubhouse smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. Only 3 board members remained. Now, Gloria hunched over a cluttered table, rifled through folders with shaking hands. Beside her sat Marianne Vogel, the longest-serving secretary in the HOA, tapping her pen nervously against a legal pad. The third seat was empty. Rick Cho, board VP, was now working remotely, though everyone knew he had lawyered up and left town. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. The center had collapsed. Marianne finally spoke. "We need to go public, a statement, apology, something." Gloria didn't look up. "Apologies admit guilt. We admit nothing." "You used HOA money, Gloria," Marianne whispered, "on land you knew we didn't own. You signed the budget too. I trusted you." Gloria's jaw clenched. Her empire wasn't just crumbling. It was turning on her. And outside, the residents were restless. Overnight, someone had posted screenshots of the HOA's internal emails to the neighborhood Facebook group. Noah denied leaking them, but he didn't have to. The people had started whispering weeks ago. Now the whispers had turned to shouts. "Why are we paying dues for trails we can't use? Who gave Gloria the authority to spend that much on lakefront signs? What else are they hiding?" At sunrise, a group of residents gathered near the clubhouse, holding handmade signs. HOA audit now. Transparency or termination. And most damning of all, recall Gloria. Noah didn't attend the protest. He didn't need to. He was busy. With help from Ron and the county investigator, he had compiled a massive packet of financial evidence, now officially submitted to the auditor's office. The paper trail was clear. Tens of thousands spent on illegal improvements. Invoices with fake descriptions. Unlicensed contractors. Kickbacks. Possibly. But even if it wasn't criminal yet, was more than enough for civil penalties and expulsion. But then something happened Noah didn't expect. Message slipped under his tent flap. Handwritten, anonymous, short. "She's going to destroy the records, the old files, the binders. Tonight?" He didn't hesitate. "By sundown." Noah and a deputy from the sheriff's department stood outside the HOA clubhouse as the front lights flickered on. Through the windows, they could see Gloria moving frantically, boxers open, binders stacked, and a shredder humming loudly behind her. Deputy Alvarez knocked once. She ignored it. He knocked again, harder finally. The door opened. Gloria stood in the frame, pale and sweat-beaded. Her eyes darted between the officer's badge and Noah's phone. "It's already recording. You can't be here," she hissed. "Yes, we can," Alvarez said flatly. "We have a preservation order from the auditor's office. Any further destruction of HOA financial records will be considered evidence tampering." "I was cleaning. Cleaning doesn't involve shredding binders marked Archives 2016 to 2019, Noah said. Behind her, Marianne appeared, arms crossed, face drained of color. "I told her not to," Marianne said softly. "I told her we needed to come clean." But Gloria had crossed the line. There was no coming back. Alvarez stepped inside, pulled open a black trash bag, and revealed the curled remnants of documents, some half-shredded, some burned around the edges. That was all the auditor's office needed, by Morning County investigators. Arrived with a full warrant. They seized hard drives, financial logs, old newsletters, and internal memos. And for the first time since its founding, the Edgewater Pines HOA board was officially suspended. The county ordered an emergency interim board election. Gloria was barred from participating, and as she stood on her front porch, reporters flashing, cameras from the curb, single envelope landed at her feet. Noah had sent it via courier. Inside was a simple typed notice, eviction filed. "You are trespassing on private land. You have 10 days to vacate your encroaching structures or face court-ordered removal." The lake she'd claimed, the power she'd flaunted it, was all gone. But she wasn't done fighting. Not yet, because deep in her filing cabinet, hidden behind a false drawer, lay one final Documenta land plat amendment she had secretly pushed years ago. And if it held up in court, might take Noah down with her. The courthouse buzzed with an energy that felt more like a battleground than a place of justice. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashed relentlessly. And residents of Edgewater Pines packed the wooden benches, eyes fixed on the unfolding. Noah sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, flanked by his lawyer and a mountain of evidence. Across the aisle, Gloria appeared calm but sharp-eyed, her own attorney ready with a briefcase full of documents. Judge Harrington, a no-nonsense woman known for her razor-sharp intellect, called the court to order. The air was thick with tension. As the first witness took the stand, Ron Blevins, the ex-treasurer turned whistleblower. Ron's testimony was damning. He laid bare the financial mismanagement and falsified documents, exposing the web of deceit Gloria had spun around the lake property, just when Noah thought the tide was turning irreversibly in his favor. Gloria's attorney rose, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Your Honor," he began, "we intend to present a recently discovered land amendment, filed 5 years ago, signed and recorded in the county archives, which legally extends the HOA's property lines to include the entirety of Lake Trenton and its immediate surroundings." A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom. Noah's heart skipped. Gloria's secret weapon. The attorney produced a faded, yellowed Documenta plat amendment with signatures that appeared authentic, showing the HOA as the rightful owner of the disputed land. Judge Harrington examined the document carefully, eyebrows knitting together. "No one disclosed this amendment during discovery?" she asked sharply. "No, Your Honor," Gloria's attorney replied. "It was overlooked until recently." Noah's lawyer stood immediately. "Your Honor, we request an independent forensic analysis of the document's authenticity." "This amendment could change everything," the judge nodded. "Agreed. Court will recess until we have the results." Outside the courthouse, whispers flew like wildfire. Had Gloria outmaneuvered them all? Noah refused to believe so late that evening as the sun dipped behind the pines. Noah sat in his study, the amendment spread across his desk. He examined every signature, every seal. Then a detail caught his eye, a tiny symbol in the margin. Barely visible. He called his legal team and a local historian. Together, they traced the mark back to a known forgery ring operating years ago, using backdated documents to manipulate land ownership disputes. It's a fake, a historian confirmed, but proving it in court is tricky. The next morning, armed with this revelation, Noah's lawyer filed a motion to delay proceedings until the forgery could be conclusively proven. But Gloria didn't wait. In a bold move, she filed a countersuit against Noah claiming trespassing, harassment, and defamation. The case exploded into a tangled legal mess. With every hearing, more secrets spilled out. Gloria's past dealings with local officials, the questionable contractors, even hints of bribery. Noah's camp revealed surveillance. Footage showing Gloria's supporters sneaking onto the property to sabotage his equipment. The community watched, riveted, as two forces collided, each determined to claim ownership not just of the land but of Edgewater Pines itself. And just when it seemed the battle couldn't get any messier, a new player stepped onto the scene. A quiet figure who held a key piece of evidence, one that neither side saw coming. The courtroom was packed to capacity on the day the mystery witness arrived. Murmurs spread like wildfire. No one knew who this new figure was. But their presence promised a decisive breakthrough. Judge Harrington called the court to order as the witness was sworn in. All eyes turned as an elderly man with weathered hands and calm eyes took the stand. He introduced himself as Walter Walt Reynolds, retired surveyor and lifelong resident of Edgewater Pines. I worked on the original lake survey back in the late 1970s, Walt began, his voice steady but weighted with age. And I've kept a copy of the original signed plat maps, the true boundaries of the lake and surrounding land. A collective hush fell. Noah's lawyer leaned forward, sensing the significance. Walt continued. During recent court proceedings, I reviewed the amendment Gloria presented. It wasn't just forged, it was cleverly doctored. But the real shock is that the actual county records never accepted it. I filed a sworn affidavit with the county confirming the official boundaries have never changed. He paused, glancing at Gloria, who now looked unsettled. The lake and the surrounding land, everything Gloria claimed belongs to Mr. Noah Trenton. Okay? And anyone trespassing there, even the HOA, is in violation of the law. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Harrington called for order. Then examined Walt's affidavit and the original maps he presented. After a tense recess, she returned with her ruling. The court finds that the original property boundaries, as certified in the late 1970s, remain the lawful and binding definitions for Lake Trenton and its immediate vicinity. She declared, the purported amendment submitted by the HOA is declared fraudulent and inadmissible. A wave of relief swept over Noah, but Gloria's face hardened into a mask of defiance. The judge continued. Accordingly, the trespassing claims against Mr. Trenton are upheld. The HOA is ordered to cease all activities on the lake property and remove any remaining structures or installations within 10 days. Gloria's lawyer attempted to protest, but the judge was firm. Any further attempts to obstruct Mr. Trenton's lawful ownership will result in contempt charges. Outside the courthouse, gathered residents watched as Gloria's grip on power finally slipped away. She made a brief statement, vowing to appeal and fight for the community, but it was clear her influence was shattered. Noah, exhausted, but victorious, addressed the crowd. This lake is not just my property, belongs to all of us who cherish it. I want to work with the community to protect it, to restore it, and to ensure it remains a place of peace. Months later, the HOA's interim board worked alongside Noah to clean the lakefront, remove the last remnants of the disputed fence, and open the area to all residents. The scandal prompted county officials to implement stricter oversight on HOA governance, preventing future abuses of power. As for Gloria, The legal battles drained her finances, and she eventually sold her home and moved away. Her name a cautionary tale whispered at neighborhood meetings. In the quiet that followed, Noah often sat by the lake, watching the water ripple under the sun, thinking of how close he had come to losing it all. Sometimes the fiercest battles happen not in courts, but in the heart of a community, and it's trust, more than law, that ultimately defines who truly owns a place.